Hello, folks. Welcome to Race Matters. I am Eddie Carson, and you are here at WJOP 96.3 Joppa Radio, Newburyport. You can find the show on my website, ProfessorCarson.com. You can also find it on SoundCloud as well as on YouTube. I'm glad y'all are here. June's a busy month for a lot of folks. For me, there are two significant things that happen in June that gets me all jazzed. One, a lot of us are coming off lots of celebrations as we embrace Pride Month. That's exciting, seeing all the beautiful rainbow colors flying throughout many communities and yards, and the spirit, the parades, the celebrations, reminding folks about the importance of radical love and what that looks like across so many spheres. That is just unbelievable. The other thing, of course, too, and that's what we're going to kind of lean into a little bit tonight, and that is Juneteenth. And we're going to talk about a little bit about Black excellence, Black style, the Black prophetic message, the ways in which I'm talking about the good Black funk that has brought about a lot of spirit to the American identity for why we have to engage in the notion of Juneteenth. A lot of folks know a little bit about Juneteenth. I've discovered that some folks don't know enough about Juneteenth and why Juneteenth is really kind of navigated its way to the forefront. You know, Juneteenth not only really celebrates the end of enslaved folks, the fact that we were in bondage, held by Pharaoh, and we can use that analogy to link Pharaoh to the crimes of the Egyptians as we navigated into the land of Canaan. We crossed the Red Sea into freedom in 1865 as a free Black folks. And as we really hit that biblical reference of Exodus moving forward, one of the things that came to fruition, of course, is the idea that we continue to build on the legacy of Black excellence. And Black excellence has always been there. It's just when you're enslaved, sometimes you kind of keep that enclosed in a way where only you and your people can really embrace that language, that identity. You know, over a period of time, I think we've hit a lot of things that have really defined the American identity. You know, when I think about Black excellence, right? One of the things that comes to my mind is Black art. We all know a lot about the Harlem Renaissance and the cultural movements during that period of the 1920s and a little bit into the 1930s, that blossoming of the prophetic work of Aaron Douglas. Oh, what a great artist that brother was, and Jacob Lawrence, both who depicted the African American experience and struggles and the elements that really kind of brought about the diaspora. When we think about the great Black migration that took place, Black people moving from the Deep South, from the bondage of Jim Crow and lynching, seeking greater freedom and opportunities in the North. And yet, just because that migration happened does not necessarily mean that Black folks really found the kind of sense of freedom we were looking for. But yet we saw a period in which Black people really kind of lean into art. You know, I mentioned Aaron Douglas. I mentioned folks, I think about literary folks such as, you know, Zora Neale Hurston, for example. Aaron Douglas had already crossed my mind, and we can go on and on and on. Paul Laurence Dunbar, Langston Hughes. These folks really are kind of showing that expression that W.E.B. Du Bois wanted folks, particularly white folks, to know about the style, the grace, the intellectual elements that Black people bring to the fold and to the table, things that sometimes are ignored. And, you know, and some of that style, too, is not just going back to the 20s and the 30s, but I want to start off by dedicating this episode to someone that I should have mentioned, you know, a number of shows ago, and that is the late Faith Ringgold. And Faith Ringgold, of course, recently passed away. I want to say that took place roughly around April. I think that's right. around April 12th this year. And Faith was born in I want to say in, it's escaping me. I know it's in New York, and she passed away in New Jersey at the age of 94 years old. And Faith Ringgold is someone that people need to think about, especially if they don't know a lot about her and her style and the things that she really has added in terms of some of the cultural movements that are there. You know, when I think about contemporary style and everything too, I think about what she's done to innovate art, how she leaned in and studied Picasso and really created these wonderful, innovative story quilts about not only Black struggles, but Black joy. She blended this traditional craft of quilting with this modern fine art sense of storytelling. I was honored a year ago, about this time last year, of all places, I was visiting a Picasso museum in France, absolutely. And on display, they had a whole gallery dedicated to Faith Ringgold. And I remember sitting there thinking about the style of that late sister and, what would it be like, recognizing at that point that she was 93 years old, to just catch up and to see her live, present. Later that summer, I would spend some time down at Fisk University, a historically Black college and university in Nashville, Tennessee, and they had some remnants and discussions taking place about the great Faith Ringgold. So if you don't know Faith, and we're thinking about Juneteenth and Black excellence on this episode, you know, spend a little time, check out her work, check out the narratives, the storytelling of her work, and why it's so significant when we think about African-American history, African-American culture, the fact that Black folks, we lean into the social justice movement. We follow the artwork of Faith Ringgold as she told the narratives of powerful political and made personal statements about strife and struggle. You know, Black excellence, continues when I think about jazz. And, as I was kind of running through this in my head and creating a list about all the things I could talk about when it comes to Black excellence, and we can't be here all day, folks, right? I mean, you've got to make some decisions because Black people have contributed to so many things that are wonderful. I think about just the work of great jazz folks, going back to some of his early genesis here in the United States. Because we know really you can leak and trace some of the genesis even to some aspects of jazz, going back to Africa, speaking of that diaspora, to New Orleans, for example, thinking about the blending of blues and ragtag and other musical styles, really trying to create this pioneer with folks like Louis Armstrong, who kind of really brought that funk and that element there too. We can't forget about Charlie Parker and Duke Ellington. And these are folks that I hope you've heard of. These are mainstream folks. The one I want to point out to you is one of my favorite jazz people, the late, the great, the brilliant, John Coltrane. Think about his expression. I think about Love Supreme and how he generated this element of just that rhythmic beat, and you can just hear that voice in the background talking about Love Supreme moving forward. And what was wonderful about John Coltrane and, of course, his wife Alice Coltrane is they have a son by the name of Ravi Coltrane, who is really quite leaning into his own prophetic soul in his own way. I suggest that you look up Ravi Coltrane, check out his music too. He was recently in Portsmouth, New Hampshire at the jazz club called Jimmy's. Folks, I'm telling you, he put on a show, the music, the rhythm, I mean, I was there for 2 hours and I wanted more. As it kind of came to an end, I kept thinking this can't be it. I wanted an encore. But yet, if you know a little bit about John Coltrane, you probably know a little bit now about Ravi. And that is the fact that they have kind of some of those long-winded elements. I mean, they got some stuff that'll go 10, 12, 14 minutes. So I guess it's pretty tough, right, to have an encore with that? For some folks, not for me. Not for me whatsoever. These are folks, when we think about black excellence, the reason why people like me, we lean into the style and the culture and the brilliance of black music within this beautiful black genre called jazz. I come home oftentimes, I'll rip out a vinyl, put it on my vinyl player. I'll have a seat, little John Coltrane playing there, maybe some Miles Davis, and I'll just sit back and relax and smile. Because, see, one of the things we know about black people is we have to recover. We oftentimes go through various elements of trauma when it comes to white supremacy in the United States. And for me, I have to take a break from a lot of that stuff because I'm knee deep in political orientation and education and the significance of bringing folks together to combat white supremacy, male supremacy. And I got to find a way to recoup and rejuvenate. Jazz helps me do that. It does. Much like when I sit down in my living room, I have wonderful black art displayed. Looking at that and looking at the beauty and the narratives and the storytelling that's there reminds me that I'm a proud person and I come from a proud people, and we have made a lot of progress in making other folks in the United States and really globally understand the importance of the things that we do. You know, I think about black style. You can't step away from the theater and the ways in which black people have made early contributions to the theater. I mean, we're talking about the idea that we had to invade and disrupt minstrel shows, for example, the vaudeville shows, in which they would kind of cast these racist stereotypes of black people to a way where we started to claim the theater, own the theater. And yet that brings us to a point where when we get to the Harlem Renaissance moving forward, we start to see the style of the theater come to life, the writings of the Langston Hughes, black people performing in ways in which we have the great late August Wilson, and how his plays highlighted African-American life and struggles. And if you don't know about August Wilson, again, I invite you, I encourage you to think about why those things are important. You know, black people have made contributions, you know, and I think about art, I think about style, I think about all those things, right? Some people forget that country music really is a product of black people and the influences we've had, right? We think about folks like Ray Charles, and I could be wrong on this, and I oftentimes try not to make claims or statements that I'm not completely sure, so you know, that's your job to check me on this stuff, and I'll do the same thing. But I want to say that Ray Charles may have one of the most sold country albums in American history. And I feel like I'm about right when it comes to Ray Charles and the contributions of that. I mean, we're talking about the old Opry and how that Nashville industry that controlled country music is starting to really, you know, open up a little bit for people who look like me, for black people. And yet we think about black excellence. That's the elements that's there. And, you know, and that's not to say, folks, right? Because I have my own biases. This is my show, Race Matters, so I get to create the list. But this list is not universal, it's not absolute, and it may not even fit the list of the folks you may come up with. Yes, it is true. I don't listen to a lot of rap music. I don't listen to a lot of hip-hop music these days. You know, Now, there's some stuff that I may lean into a little bit, but I don't know. I think after Tupac and Biggie, I kind of like checked out, and that's going back to the mid to the late 90s. So it's been a long time. So your list may be a little different than mine. And if it is, I would love for you to send me an email at racematterspodcast@gmail.com and tell me what your list looks like, because it could look different, right? I think about the excellence and the strife and the struggles of black people. I think about, the fact that we go back to the Harlem Renaissance, and even a little bit before that and after, where you even had Brother Malcolm X wearing some of those zoot suits that took place. Now we're in this modern fashion style where a lot of fashion has moderated from black folks. Hey, you know me, I'm kind of a traditional folks, right? I got my nice sports jacket. I got my bow tie that is universal, kind of my uniform that I wear. But I'm sure there are a lot of other folks with a lot of different styles who can talk about the significance and the impact on things. When I think about my list of black excellence here as we celebrate and we think about Juneteenth, I'm a book lover. I'm a voracious reader. I'm a bit of an antiquarian. I love literature, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. If you don't know, my favorite book, and there's not even a second place to competing with my favorite book, is Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. It's just fantastic. And if you haven't read Invisible Man, you need to run out and pick up a copy. Like, absolutely. You want to read that. I think about other literary works. I think about Maya Angelou, for example, Toni Morrison. Speaking of Toni Morrison, I'm about to revisit her work, The Bluest Eye. Fantastic read, especially if you want to get into some of the pathology of black African-American life and really how we wrestle with family relationships and really some of the dark aspects that all communities, regardless of your race, wrestle with too. Another thing, if we exceed these aspects and we think about black excellence, I have a list of folks here that I think we should honor and we should celebrate. And I want to talk about folks even beyond the traditional people that we think about. We always think about Martin Luther King and his contributions to the civil rights movement. Now, do people absolutely lean into Martin Luther King Jr. Day or really understand what his message about? Have they read his works? Have people taken the time to dig into the narrative of really the challenges of civil rights propagated by Malcolm and Martin? Probably not. See, for me, when Juneteenth rolls around, one of the things that I do is I spend a little bit of time leaning into black culture and identity, all the styles and the funk that I just talked about, but I spend time with folks like Frederick Douglass. And the 4th of July is coming up. I hope that folks who are listening to this, if you are in the hood and you have time, that you will come out to Brown Square, right by the Garrison Inn, the Garrison Hotel here in Newburyport on the 4th of July, starting at 10 o'clock a.m. Yours truly, your brother, right here, will say some words about Douglass, about transformation and progress. And then all those who gather, we're going to engage in a community reading of What's to the Slave on the 4th of July. And this, in many ways, in importance, is I connect the 4th of July to black excellence when it comes to Juneteenth. I sit back, and I spend time reading Douglass, listening to lectures on YouTube, and really think about other black thinkers and intellectuals and literary figures who have a lot to contribute to the promise of black excellence on Juneteenth. And that doesn't just happen on Juneteenth. That carries over to the 4th of July, as I don't traditionally celebrate the 4th of July. The 4th of July is not my holiday. That's what Frederick Douglass said. This is not my holiday. That brother in his speech, What is to the Slave on the 4th of July, he'll reach out and he'll say, That is your holiday, not my holiday, folks. And that's kind of how I think about this stuff. I would say that other black folks who are really starting to grapple with culture and black excellence will sit there and they'll think about some of the other contributing figures beyond both Brother Martin and Malcolm. And I think about Angela Davis, who is alive and well, that former Black Panther who really spent time helping young school kids with free lunches, helping them read, engaging in political campaigns and activism. She's someone who is a prolific author, professor, verse advocate. I mean, and you can't escape her impact when you think about the fact that she engages in the rights of prisoners' rights beyond just aspects dating back to the civil rights movement. She's a feminist movement element that belongs to her, right? I mean, we think about how she think about queer feminism and the right of women and their plight, particularly when we talk about the intersectionality, when we start thinking about things such as race, class, and gender. Here in an oppressive criminal justice system that's problematic, you have to do that. You know, for those who know me and know that I'm a scholar who focused quite a bit on W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the first great sociologists, some would argue the first great sociologist to come about, a historian. The brother helped found the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And he did this within a interracial vanguard of folks too in its founding. You know, one of the things I think about when I think about Brother W.E.B. Du Bois is I think about that idea that he said we have 4 questions we have to think about, and not just black people, but all people. Those questions, of course, are profound, right? One of those questions is how shall integrity face oppression, right? The things that we continue to wrestle with here in the 21st century. What shall honesty do in the face of deception, decency, in the face of insult? As W.E.B. Du Bois wrestled with that. What about elements of self-defense? And how do we think about our projection as a people? How shall we accomplish and meet and address the answers of the contradictions in the contradictory norms that are out there too? W.E.B. Du Bois, in thinking about that black excellently, really wrestled with that quite a bit. I mean, here's someone who stated that, what does it mean to be a problem? What does it mean to be a Negro here in this country? That two-ness he addresses in really trying to understand the social construct and identity of black people. What does it mean for me to be both African and an American when we think about that style? We talk about someone who was fluent in German. He attended Fisk University, which I already mentioned. He would go on to become the first black man to receive a PhD from Harvard University, and he was that close to receiving a second PhD in economics while in Germany. Funding got pulled. He had to come back, but we think about all the things that he leans into, especially when it comes to the grace of art and style and literature. Prolific writer all the way up to the end, to the great age of 95. I only wish and hope to one day even compare to the greatness of a W.E.B. Du Bois, my intellectual hero. A Frederick Douglass, another intellectual hero, right? I have no excuses. They've paved the way for black excellence, and I am really sitting here talking about the campaign for black excellence and how we can do that. You know, we think about other folks that I think about, that I want to salute when I think about black excellence. I want to lean in, and I have to bring this black queer sister up by the name of Nina Simone. And I suspect many of you know Nina Simone. And singer, songwriter, civil rights activist. Boy, that sister used her music to address all kind of conditions and social issues. One of my favorite songs, and if you've never heard this song, you need to check it out. It's called Mississippi Goddamn. I think I can say that on air because it's the title of a song. And it became the anthem for the civil rights movement. Mississippi Goddamn, Nina Simone. Those are some of the things you want to think about. A recent movie came out, and I haven't seen it yet. And I must confess, I'm a fan. Though I don't know as much about this brother as I should. I haven't seen a movie. And I don't listen always to a lot of reggae. And boy, oh boy, I mean, we're talking about we're talking about Bob Marley. He makes that list, right? When we talk about all the great, wonderful black folks who are campaigning for greatness and everything too, right? We've already mentioned some of the earlier black artists, but, as I think about someone, Jean-Michel Basquiat, he's someone who addressed elements of race and identity and social inequality, and he looked to transform traditional art. Again, another thing to check me on with this brother, and I think I'm right, but I want to say, as a contemporary artist, he had a piece that sold for, I don't know, $115 million, and that's within the last 8 years. Oh, talk about a campaign for excellence. Just unbelievable. But when I think about grace and I think about style and I think about excellence of black folks too, I think about the ordinary folks who are out there really doing wonderful stuff, organizing Juneteenth events, folks who are master chefs, working in industries and creating a great taste of food, particularly expanding the palate of white folks and those who've not really leaned into soul food in the ways that they need to. Those are the folks that I think about too. I'm a bit of a wine person. Some people will say even somewhat of a wine snob. I push back and I disagree. I just have a little taste in terms of what I like. I think about the sommeliers, particularly those black African-American sommeliers, who are really starting to expand the notion of black style and excellence and the traditional elements that are there. I think about all the academics, the teachers. I think about those folks who are in the trenches in different ways, raising another generation of folks by being in the front of the classroom. You don't see a lot of black folks in the front of classrooms these days. And that's hard. I went to a high school. I went to a predominantly white independent school, day school. Did not have one black instructor in front of me. I did not have that black role model that I continue to try to be to black people all the time. That's part of my element right here. Whether I'm doing it successfully 100% or not, I don't know, but I'm trying to. But one of the things that I lean into and I push toward is the fact that I want black folks to see me not only in front of the classroom, but I want black folks to see me as a leading administrator, as an academic, as a scholar, as an author, as someone who shows up when they need to show up and who does not hide and rest when there's a battle to be fought in the forefront. That is not that. I want to be that role model and that hero for black folks and white folks, for Asian folks, brown folks, indigenous peoples. I want to be that person, much like my colleagues who look like me, because there are just not a lot of us out there. But I also want to applaud the other folks who are really contributing to black excellence too. And that's the folks who the custodial folks, the janitorial folks, people who engage in the bureaucratic processes of keeping our communities clean and neat and organized. Those folks, those black folks who get up every day and work hard, whether it's driving a bus, whether it's working as a sanitation worker, whether if it's something we may not think is a big deal, which is making sure your children, your young children are crossing the street and they are making it to school okay and on time. See, black invisibility is a real invisibility. We oftentimes see black people for the tropes, the stereotypes that have manifested itself in ways that are problematic. And yet, the black folks who are out there doing good work become invisible. I mean, those black law enforcement folks, those black firefighters, those black activists who are organizing in neighborhoods and communities to keep them safe. I want us to think about all those things that I've talked about here on Race Matters at WJOP 96.3 Joppa Radio. And I hope you'll think about these things. I hope you'll lean in and celebrate. I hope you'll think about some of the names that I've thrown out there. Hopefully you've heard of all those folks. And if you have not, that's okay. Google, look them up, learn a little bit more. And there's a plethora of folks that we can lean into. I want to challenge folks as I bring this episode to an end, to look around your home as we think about Black excellence in Juneteenth. Do you have any artwork by and or about Black people in your house? Do you? Do you have any books, other literary works written by or about Black people? Have you visited a Black-owned restaurant, Black-owned bookstore? Have you supported Black people in a way where financially you're giving money in ways to support their businesses and their avenue as they continue to spread the Black excellence that we know Black people continue to do? Right? Have you done those things? When was the last time you broke bread with someone who looks like me, Eddie Carson? I've broken bread with a number of folks, and they've reached out and said, I want you over because I want to have a conversation with you, and I want us to get to know each other. That is okay, because you know what? I'd rather you try too hard to meet someone that is a little different than you than not try at all, and I welcome that. Let's continue to celebrate the excellence of Black people. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Pride Month. This is Brother Carson here at Race Matters, WJOP 96.3. Until next time, my friends, I hope you'll show up out at Brown Square to lean in with me as we celebrate not the 4th of July, but what is to the slave on the 4th of July when we think about that Black, brilliant, awesome, radical brother by the name of Frederick Douglass. Thank you, people.